The Vakrine Imperium had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their ships moved through space like silver shadows, faster than anything else that flew among the stars. Their weapons could turn a planet's surface into glass within hours. Their shields made them nearly impossible to destroy. Across hundreds of worlds, dozens of different species bowed to Vakrine authority. Some did so willingly. Most had no choice. The Imperium maintained control through fear and overwhelming force. Their enforcement fleet consisted of massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of breaking a world's defenses alone. When a species resisted, the Vakrine responded with mathematical precision. They calculated exactly how much destruction was needed to break a population's will, then delivered it without hesitation or mercy. Humanity was new to this galactic order. Earth had been discovered only 15 years earlier, when human scientists sent their first primitive radio signals into deep space. The Vakrine arrived 6 months later, their ships appearing in orbit without warning. They studied humanity for 3 weeks, analyzing everything about human civilization, technology, and military capability. Then they delivered their judgment. Humanity would be allowed to survive. However, they would remain confined to their home system. No human ship would travel beyond the orbit of Pluto. No human would develop faster than light technology. No human military would grow beyond what was needed for maintaining order on Earth itself. In exchange, the Vakrine would not conquer Earth. They would not enslave humanity. They would simply watch and wait. A monitoring station was built in orbit around Mars. 300 Vakrine personnel staffed it at all times, tracking every ship launch, every energy signature, every technological development on Earth and its colonies. The message was clear. Humanity existed because the Imperium allowed it. That permission could be revoked at any moment. For 14 years, humanity obeyed. The United Earth government, formed hastily after first contact, accepted the restrictions. They had seen recordings of what happened to species that resisted. Entire civilizations reduced to ash. Billions dead in a matter of days. No one wanted Earth to become another cautionary tale. But humans were curious by nature. While official channels obeyed Vakrine law, secret projects continued in hidden facilities. Scientists worked in underground laboratories, studying the fragments of data they had gathered about Vakrine technology. Engineers designed ships that might possibly be able to break the light-speed barrier. Military planners developed strategies for fighting an enemy with vastly superior technology. The breakthrough came in a research station built inside a hollowed asteroid beyond Neptune's orbit. Dr. Sarah Chen and her team cracked the fundamental mathematics behind faster-than-light travel. Their approach was crude compared to Vakrine quantum drives, but it worked. The prototype drive could push a small ship to twice the speed of light. It was noisy, inefficient, and dangerous. But it was theirs. The test flight lasted 17 minutes before the Vakrine detected it. Their response was immediate. Within 2 days, a full enforcement fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. 7 massive dreadnoughts, each 3 kilometers long, accompanied by 20 smaller cruisers and 40 support vessels. They moved toward Earth with terrible purpose. The commander of the fleet broadcast a message to every screen on Earth simultaneously. High Executive Vrazin spoke in perfect English, his translated voice cold and mechanical. Humanity had violated the terms of their containment. They had developed forbidden technology. The consequences were predetermined. Earth would be occupied. Its military forces would be dismantled. Its population would be integrated into the Imperium as a labor caste. Resistance would result in the sterilization of Earth's surface. Humanity had 72 hours to accept these terms. Panic swept across Earth. Governments scrambled to respond. The United Earth Fleet, consisting of 43 warships and 100 support craft, mobilized for defense. Everyone knew it was hopeless. Human ships carried kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles. The Vakrine had energy shields that could absorb nuclear blasts without flickering. Human ships used fusion drives. The Vakrine moved 3 times faster. It would not be a battle. It would be an extermination. But humanity would not surrender without fighting. The United Earth government voted to resist. If these were humanity's final days, they would face them standing upright rather than kneeling. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier would be thrown against the Vakrine. They would buy time for evacuation efforts, for civilian ships to scatter across the solar system, for some fragment of humanity to survive even if Earth fell. One ship represented humanity's greatest hope and most desperate gamble. The UHSF Indomitable had been under construction for 8 years, built from plans developed in those same secret facilities that created the FTL drive. It incorporated every lesson humanity had learned about Vacrine warfare. Though that knowledge was limited and fragmentary, the Indomitable looked nothing like the elegant Vacrine vessels with their smooth curves and crystalline structures. It was a brutal, ugly thing. 1,500 meters of layered armor plating, redundant systems, and overwhelming firepower. Its hull was designed to ablate under plasma fire, shedding heat and energy layer by layer. Its railguns could accelerate tungsten rounds to a significant fraction of light speed. Its experimental kinetic barrier system used magnetic fields to deflect incoming projectiles. Most importantly, the Indomitable was built to take damage and keep fighting. Every system had backups. Every section could be sealed off and operated independently. The ship had been designed with the understanding that it would be hit, repeatedly, by weapons that should destroy it. The question was whether it could survive long enough to strike back. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge as her crew made final preparations. She was 42 years old, a veteran of the resource wars that had preceded human unity. She had commanded destroyers in the asteroid belt conflicts and served as first officer on humanity's largest battleship. When volunteers were requested for a suicide mission, she had stepped forward immediately. 847 crew members now prepared for battle stations throughout the ship. Most were young, in their 20s and 30s. They had grown up in a world where humanity existed at the sufferance of an alien empire. They had watched their species confined, restricted, treated as primitive children who needed supervision. Now they had a chance to show the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. The plan was simple because nothing complex would work. The Indomitable would intercept the Vacrine fleet before it reached Earth. It would engage the enemy ships directly, hopefully destroying or damaging several of them. When the Indomitable was destroyed, as it inevitably would be, the rest of the United Earth fleet would attack while the Vacrine were distracted. It might buy a few extra hours, perhaps a day. Elena addressed her crew over the ship's communication system. Her voice was steady, calm. She told them they were about to make history. She told them their actions would be remembered as long as humanity survived. She told them she was honored to serve with them. She did not tell them they would survive. Everyone already knew they would not. The Indomitable launched from its construction dock near Jupiter. Its fusion drives burned at maximum thrust, pushing the massive warship toward the advancing Vacrine fleet. Behind it, Earth's defenses mobilized. Orbital weapons platforms powered up. Defense satellites moved into position. On the surface, cities prepared for bombardment while evacuation ships lifted off by the thousands. In the command center of the Vacrine flagship, High Executive Vrazin watched the human ship approach. His subordinates reported its specifications: primitive fusion drive, kinetic weapons, simple armor, no energy shields, no advanced countermeasures. It was, by any reasonable standard, already dead. Vrazin assigned 3 cruisers to intercept and destroy the human vessel. He saw no reason to waste more resources on such an insignificant threat. The cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the Indomitable. Within 6 hours, they would be in weapon range. Within 7, the human ship would be debris. Elena watched the enemy ships approach on her displays. 3 Vacrine cruisers, each one massing twice what the Indomitable did. She ordered the crew to battle stations. Weapons were charged. Armor plating was locked into final configuration. Damage control teams stood ready. In the depths of the ship, the experimental FTL drive hummed to life, not for travel but to power the kinetic barriers. The distance closed. 5 million kilometers, 4 million, 3 million. The Vacrine ships held their fire, waiting until they were close enough for their plasma lances to punch through any defense. They assumed the human ship would try to run. They were wrong. Elena gave the order. The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the enemy. The 3 Vacrine cruisers adjusted their formation as the human ship accelerated toward them. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Commander Thelkor watched the approaching vessel with mild curiosity. In 300 years of service, he had destroyed 47 enemy ships. None had ever chosen to charge directly at superior forces. Most tried to flee. Some attempted evasive maneuvers. This human ship did neither. Thelkor found it almost admirable in its futility. He reviewed the tactical data one final time. The human vessel possessed thick armor but no energy shields. Its weapons were kinetic projectiles, technology the Vakreen had abandoned 2,000 years ago. Against his fleet's plasma lances and quantum shields, it had no chance of survival. Still, the humans deserved to die fighting rather than running. He would grant them that dignity. At 2 million kilometers, Thelkor gave the order to fire. All three Vakreen cruisers unleashed their plasma lances simultaneously. Streams of superheated matter, contained in magnetic bottles and accelerated to near light speed, crossed the distance in seconds. The targeting was perfect. 9 direct hits struck the Indomitable across its forward sections. The human ship's hull glowed white-hot where the plasma struck. Armor plating vaporized, creating expanding clouds of metal vapor. Structural supports melted. Secondary explosions rippled across the impact sites. From a distance, it looked like the Indomitable had been mortally wounded. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Elena held onto her command chair as the ship shuddered under the impacts. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in from multiple sections. Hull breach in Section 7, fires in Section 12, 17 crew members dead, 43 injured. But the ship was still flying. The armor was doing its job, ablating away in layers, shedding heat and energy into space rather than allowing it to penetrate to vital systems. Elena checked her tactical display. The Vakreen ships were holding their distance, waiting to see if the Indomitable would break apart on its own. They were giving their weapons time to recharge for the next volley. That was their first mistake. She opened the ship-wide channel. All railgun batteries prepare to fire on my mark. Target the lead cruiser. Maximum rate of fire. Drain everything we have into that bastard. The Indomitable had 12 railgun batteries, 6 on each side. Each battery contained 8 individual guns capable of firing 20 rounds per minute. The tungsten projectiles they launched massed 200 kilograms each and moved at 5% of light speed when they left the barrel. The kinetic energy delivered by a single round exceeded that of a large nuclear weapon. The Vakreen shields were designed to absorb and deflect energy weapons. They created quantum-locked barriers that could shunt plasma blasts and particle beams into parallel dimensions. They were nearly perfect defenses against every weapon the Imperium had encountered in 3,000 years of conquest. But they had not been designed to stop physical matter moving at relativistic speeds. At 1 million kilometers, Elena gave the order. First 96 railguns spoke as one. The recoil pushed the Indomitable backward despite its enormous mass. In the first 10 seconds, almost 2,000 tungsten rounds crossed the distance to the lead Vakreen cruiser. They arrived in a storm of kinetic death. The Vakreen shields caught the first few rounds, shunting their energy away as designed, but each impact drew power from the shield generators. After 50 hits, the shields began to flicker. After 100, they were glowing visibly from the strain. After 200, they failed. The remaining rounds struck the cruiser's hull directly. The Vakreen ship was never designed to be hit by physical projectiles. Its structure was optimized for energy distribution, not kinetic resistance. The first rounds punched through the outer hull. The next ones penetrated deeper, tearing through deck after deck. Systems that had never needed physical shielding shattered like glass. Power conduits exploded. Atmosphere vented into space through thousands of puncture wounds. Commander, Thelkor had 3 seconds to understand what was happening before a tungsten round traveled through his bridge and out the other side, leaving a perfectly circular hole 2 meters in diameter. The bridge explosive decompressed. Thelkor died still trying to process how his shields had failed. The lead cruiser went dark. Its power systems, never built to handle this kind of punishment, cascaded into failure. Emergency protocols tried to engage but found nothing to work with. The ship began to drift, powerless, its crew dead or dying in the dark. The other 2 Vakreen cruisers immediately broke off their approach. Their commanders sent emergency broadcasts to the main fleet. They uploaded tactical data showing what had happened. Across the Vakreen command network, alarms began to sound. A cruiser had been destroyed. For the first time in 3 centuries, an enforcement fleet vessel had been eliminated in combat. Elena did not waste time celebrating. The Indomitable was still badly damaged. The railguns were overheated and needed time to cool before they could fire again. The 2 remaining Vakreen ships were regrouping, and they would not make the same mistake twice. She ordered the ship to come about and head away from the enemy at maximum thrust. Damage report, she called out. Her first officer, Commander Marcus Webb, read from his console. Hull breaches sealed in sections 7, 12, and 19. We lost 93 crew members in the first volley. Medical bays are overwhelmed. Armor is down to 60% effectiveness in forward sections. Railguns will be ready to fire again in 20 minutes. Kinetic barriers are still operational but running at 40% power. Elena nodded. They had survived the first engagement but barely, and they had been incredibly lucky. The Vakreen had not taken them seriously, had not committed their full firepower, had given the Indomitable time to strike first. That would not happen again. On the Vakreen flagship, High Executive Vrazin stared at the tactical display in disbelief. One of his cruisers was gone. Its crew of 400 was dead. The human ship, which should have been vaporized, was retreating with damage but still operational. He felt something he had not experienced in 200 years of service. Uncertainty. Vrazin immediately issued new orders. The enforcement fleet would maintain its course toward Earth, but he reassigned 6 additional cruisers to pursue and destroy the human warship. This time they would not underestimate the primitive vessel. They would attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. They would not give it time to concentrate fire. They would destroy it through overwhelming force applied correctly. But even as he gave these orders, Vrazin felt a nagging concern. The human ship had survived a direct assault that should have obliterated it. It had destroyed a Vakreen cruiser using weapons the Imperium considered obsolete. What other surprises might the humans have prepared? On Earth, every screen showed the same images. The Indomitable engaged in battle. The Vakreen cruiser going dark. The impossible had happened. Humanity had struck back and drawn blood. In the streets, people who had been preparing for death began to feel something they had not felt in days. Hope. In the military command centers, the reaction was more measured. One Vakreen ship destroyed at the cost of 93 human lives and massive damage to humanity's most advanced warship. The tactical situation had not changed. Earth was still doomed, but the Indomitable had bought them something valuable, proof that the Vakreen could be hurt. Elena sat in her command chair, watching the 6 new Vakreen ships alter course to pursue her. The logical choice was to return to Earth, to join the fleet in its defense of humanity's homeworld. The Indomitable was too damaged to make much difference, but every ship would count in the final battle. She made a different choice. Earth's fate was likely already sealed. The enforcement fleet would reach it in 2 days, and nothing humanity possessed could stop them. But the Indomitable, damaged as it was, had become something more valuable than another defender. It had become a weapon that the Vakreen feared. Elena changed course, pointing the Indomitable away from Earth, toward the outer system. The pursuing Vakreen ships adjusted to follow. She had pulled 6 cruisers away from the invasion fleet. That meant 6 fewer ships bombarding Earth when the assault began. Every hour she kept them chasing her was another hour for evacuations, for preparations, for miracles to happen. Commander Webb looked at her with understanding. "We're not going home." "No," Elena said quietly. "We're going hunting. If we're going to die, we're taking as many of them with us as we can. And we're going to make them work for every kill." The Indomitable accelerated into the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, 6 Vakreen cruisers in pursuit. Behind them, Earth prepared for invasion. Ahead lay only the black emptiness of space and whatever opportunities for violence Elena could create from desperation and fury. 3 months passed. In that time, the Indomitable had become a ghost story told across Vakreen communication channels. The human warship appeared in systems far from Earth, struck at Vakreen supply convoys, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. It destroyed 2 more cruisers and damaged 5 others. It mined shipping lanes with kinetic kill vehicles. It ambushed patrol groups near asteroid fields. It refused to die. Elena had transformed her ship into something the Vakreen had never encountered before: a guerrilla warship. The Imperium had conquered the galaxy through overwhelming force applied in direct confrontation. Their fleets moved openly, confident in their superiority. They had forgotten what it meant to be hunted. The Indomitable used every advantage desperation and creativity could provide. It hid in the shadow of gas giants, its hull cold and silent, waiting for prey. It accelerated from behind asteroids at maximum thrust, firing everything before the enemy could react. It used gravity wells to slingshot into attack positions that should have been impossible. It fought with the cunning of a species that had never been able to rely on superior technology. The crew had been reduced from 847 to 412. Some had died in battle. Others had succumbed to injuries that the overworked medical bay could not treat adequately. The ship was held together by improvised repairs and engineering miracles. Sections that had been breached were simply sealed off and abandoned. The once gleaming corridors were scorched, patched, and worn. But the Indomitable kept fighting. Every victory was broadcast on open channels that the Vakreen could not fully suppress. Other species heard these transmissions. They learned that the Imperium's ships could be destroyed. They saw that resistance was possible, and some of them began to hope. Fleet Admiral Corvin had been assigned to hunt down and destroy the human ship. He commanded a task force of 20 vessels, including his flagship, a dreadnought named Eternal Dominion. For 3 months, he had chased the Indomitable across 4 sectors, always arriving hours or days too late. The human captain was clever, unpredictable, and willing to take risks that no rational commander would accept. Corvin respected his enemy, which made him hate the situation even more. The longer this hunt continued, the more the Imperium looked weak. Subject species were beginning to whisper in secret. Riots had broken out on 7 worlds. 3 governors had been assassinated. The foundation of fear that held the Imperium together was developing cracks. He stood in the command center of his flagship, studying star charts. The Indomitable needed supplies. It needed repairs. It could not continue indefinitely with just its crew and whatever it could salvage from destroyed enemy ships. Somewhere someone was helping the humans. Corvin was certain of it. His intelligence officers had been interrogating sources throughout the sector. Bit by bit, a picture emerged. The Lixian, a species enslaved 400 years ago, were making contact with the human ship. They were providing safe harbors in abandoned mining stations. They were sharing intelligence on Vakreen fleet movements. They were committing treason. Corvin prepared a new strategy. He would use the Beacon of Drayan as bait. The beacon was a strategic way station that controlled faster-than-light travel lanes across an entire sector. If the human captain could destroy it, dozens of Vakreen ships would be stranded, unable to jump to FTL until they traveled weeks to reach another beacon. It was a tempting target. Too tempting. He leaked false intelligence through channels he knew the Lixian rebels monitored. The beacon was lightly defended, the information suggested. Only 4 cruisers and minimal station security. A strike now could cripple Vakreen operations in the sector. He made it look genuine, including real deployment orders that pulled ships away from the area. Then he positioned his entire task force in hiding. 20 Vakreen warships waited in the shadow of a nearby brown dwarf, their systems powered down to minimum, invisible to long-range sensors. When the Indomitable arrived, Corvin would activate his fleet and destroy the human ship in a single overwhelming strike. No clever tactics would save them. No ambush would help. Just raw superiority of numbers and firepower. 3 days later, the Indomitable arrived at the beacon's location. But it was not alone. 3 other ships accompanied it. Converted freighters. Crude things built by Lixian rebels and armed with weapons scavenged from destroyed Vakreen vessels and supplemented with human railguns. The rebels had committed their few military assets to this attack. Elena studied the beacon on her tactical display. It looked vulnerable, just as the intelligence had suggested. But something felt wrong. The deployment was too convenient. The security too minimal. She had survived 3 months by trusting her instincts when logic said to attack. "It's a trap," she said quietly. Commander Webb stood beside her. "We could run. Head deeper into uncontrolled space." Elena shook her head. "Running doesn't win wars, and we're not getting another chance at a target this valuable. If it's a trap, we spring it on our terms." She opened a channel to the rebel ships. "This is Captain Vasquez to all allied vessels. We're going in, but assume heavy enemy presence. Stay close to the Indomitable. When things go bad, and they will, follow my lead." The 4 ships advanced toward the beacon. At 10,000 kilometers, Corvin's fleet decloaked. 20 Vakreen warships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the human and rebel vessels. Weapons charged. Targeting systems locked on. The trap had been sprung. Corvin broadcast on all frequencies. "Captain Vasquez, you have fought well, but this ends now. Your ship is surrounded. You cannot escape. Surrender and your crew will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist and you will all die." Elena looked at the tactical display showing 20 enemy ships in perfect attack formation. Her 3 allied vessels were already taking fire. One exploded as plasma lances overwhelmed its makeshift shields. Another lost propulsion and began to tumble. The math was simple and brutal. There was no victory here, no escape, no miracle. She opened a channel to her crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We walked into a trap and we're not getting out. So we're not trying to get out. We're going through. Helm, plot a collision course with the beacon station. Maximum thrust. All power to forward kinetic barriers and armor. We're going to hit that station like a hammer." The Vakrine ships could not fire without risking hits on their own strategic asset. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only move Elena could see. The Indomitable's engines screamed to full power. The massive warship accelerated directly toward the beacon, ignoring the enemy fleet, focusing everything on a single objective. Corvin realized what the human captain intended. All ships destroy that vessel now. Ignore the station's safety margins. But he had positioned his fleet too perfectly, in overlapping fields of fire designed to trap the enemy vessels. Now his own ships were in each other's way. The nearest cruisers fired, but their shots were rushed, poorly aimed. The Indomitable's kinetic barriers deflected some. Its armor absorbed others. The distance closed rapidly. 8,000 kilometers. 5,000. 2,000. The beacon's defensive weapons opened fire, but they were designed to deter raiders, not stop a 1,500-meter warship traveling at maximum thrust. The Indomitable smashed through the station's shields like they were paper. The impact was catastrophic. The Indomitable's reinforced bow crumpled, but it had been built to take damage. The station's outer hull ruptured. Atmosphere vented into space. The human ship's momentum carried it deep into the station's interior, tearing through deck after deck, before finally coming to rest buried in the heart of the beacon. Elena pulled herself up from where the impact had thrown her. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge. Half her crew was dead or unconscious. The ship's systems were failing. But they were inside the station. And stations had something ships did not. Control systems. Computer cores. Intelligence databases. She activated the ship-wide channel. "All Marines, this is the captain. Deploy into the station. Secure the command center. We're taking this beacon." Behind her, the remaining Lixian rebel ship was trading fire with 5 Vakrine cruisers. It was hopelessly outmatched, but it was buying time. Time for the Indomitable's Marines to pour into the station. Time for what might be humanity's last act of defiance. Commander Webb checked his tactical board. "We have 300 Marines deploying. Station security is responding. Vakrine fleet is maneuvering to prevent any escape, but they can't fire on the station without destroying it themselves." Elena nodded. They had traded their lives for a chance at something bigger than survival. Now they had to make it count. She grabbed a sidearm and headed for the exit. "Come on, we're not running this fight from a bridge. We're finishing it in person." The corridors of the beacon station were chaos. Human Marines fought deck by deck against Vakrine security forces. The Vakrine soldiers were better trained, better equipped, and fighting on familiar ground. But the humans were desperate, which made them dangerous in ways the Vakrine could not predict. Corporal James Morrison led his squad through a shattered bulkhead into a control room. 3 Vakrine soldiers opened fire immediately. Morrison's squad scattered, taking cover behind overturned consoles. Private Chen took a plasma bolt to the chest and died before she hit the floor. Morrison returned fire with his rifle, the kinetic rounds punching through a Vakrine soldier's armor. This was how it went, room by room, corridor by corridor. The humans paid for every meter in blood, but they kept advancing. Behind them, more Marines poured out of the Indomitable. They established defensive positions, set up medical stations, and pushed deeper into the beacon. Elena moved through the carnage with Commander Webb and a security detail. She had studied the station's layout during the approach. The command center was 17 decks above their current position. That was where she needed to be. That was where the station's secrets would be kept. A Vakrine officer appeared at the end of the corridor and raised his weapon. Before he could fire, one of Elena's security team put 3 rounds through his faceplate. The officer collapsed, his body armor designed to stop energy weapons but useless against simple bullets traveling at high velocity. They found a lift shaft and began climbing. The lifts themselves were not working, but the Marines carried equipment for exactly this situation. They set up a portable winch and began hauling themselves up deck by deck. Below them, The sounds of battle echoed through the shaft. On the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Admiral Corvin watched his tactical display with growing frustration. The human ship was inside his station. His fleet surrounded the beacon, but they could not fire without destroying the strategic asset themselves. He had sent the station's security forces to repel the invaders, but the humans were fighting with suicidal determination. He considered his options. He could board the station with his own troops, but that would take hours to organize. He could try to cut off power and life support, but the humans had already sealed the sections they controlled. He could destroy the beacon entirely, but that would cripple Vakreen operations in the sector for months. The truth was that the human captain had outmaneuvered him. She had turned his perfect trap into a hostage situation. As long as her forces held any part of the station, Corvin could not simply obliterate it. He opened a channel to the station's commander. Status report. Station Commander Velric's voice was strained. The humans have secured decks 40 through 57. They are advancing on the command center. My security forces are holding them back, but barely. They fight like animals. No concern for their own survival. Corvin considered this. If the humans reached the command center, they could potentially access the station's systems. But what would they gain? Navigation data? Fleet deployments? Useful information for the rebellion, certainly, but nothing that justified this level of sacrifice. Unless they were after something else. Corvin felt a cold realization. The beacons were not just waypoints for faster-than-light travel. They were control nodes. Each beacon managed the quantum fields that made FTL possible in its sector. And those controls were centralized, networked, part of a system that spanned the entire galaxy. If the humans gained access to the command center, they would not just have information. They would have control codes. They could shut down FTL travel throughout the sector, or worse, they could access the network itself. Corvin immediately broadcast to all ships. All Marines board the station immediately. Secure the command center at any cost. Lethal force is authorized. No prisoners. Elena was 12 decks from the command center when the Vakreen counter-assault began. Hundreds of Vakreen Marines poured into the station from docked ships. They were fresh, fully armed, and organized. The human forces were exhausted, running low on ammunition and bleeding from dozens of casualties. Commander Webb received the reports on his tactical pad. Captain, we have Vakreen Marines landing in force. They're going to overwhelm our positions within the hour. Elena kept climbing. Then we need to move faster. How many Marines do we have between here and the command center? 43. Plus our security detail, maybe 60 total. And between us and the Vakreen reinforcements, about 200 humans holding the line. They're not going to last long. Elena knew what she was asking. Those 200 Marines would have to hold against overwhelming numbers while she took the command center. Most of them would die. All of them might die. She opened the general channel. This is Captain Vasquez to all units. The Vakreen are coming in force. I need every Marine not currently with me to hold the line. Buy us time to reach the command center. I know what I'm asking. I know the cost. But if we succeed here, it changes everything. Hold them. Please. Hold them long enough. The response came from Sergeant Rodriguez, whose voice was calm despite the gunfire in the background. We've got this, Captain. Take the objective. We'll make sure no one gets past us. Elena closed the channel before her voice could break. She had sent people to die before. It was part of command, but knowing she would probably never see them again, knowing they were choosing this sacrifice willingly, made it harder rather than easier. They reached the entrance to the command center 4 minutes later. The door was sealed, armored, designed to withstand anything short of a shipboard weapon. Morrison's squad was already there, having taken a faster route. They had shaped charges ready. Blow it, Elena ordered. The explosion tore the door from its frame. Human Marines rushed through into a large circular room filled with holographic displays and control stations. A dozen Vakreen technicians looked up in shock. They were not combat troops. Some raised their hands in surrender. Others dove for weapons. Elena shot the nearest one, who reached for a plasma pistol. Secure the room. Webb, get on those systems. Find me the control access. Webb moved to the main console while Marines secured the perimeter. The Vakreen technicians were restrained and moved to one side. Below, the sounds of battle grew more intense. Rodriguez's forces were engaging the Vakreen Marine assault. Webb worked frantically at the controls. The Vakreen interface was alien. but he had studied captured systems for months. Basic principles of computing were universal. File structures, command hierarchies, access protocols. Got something, he said. These are deployment orders. Fleet positions, supply routes. Keep going. There has to be more. Webb dove deeper into the system. Minutes passed. Each one felt like an eternity. Then his eyes widened. Captain, I found it. The beacon network. All of them. Every station in the galaxy. Elena moved to look over his shoulder. The display showed a galactic map with hundreds of points of light. Each one represented a beacon station. Lines connected them, showing the network of FTL routes that made the Imperium's control possible. Can you access the controls? She asked. Webb's fingers moved across the interface. Yes, but Captain, this is not just navigation data. These beacons do not just enable FTL travel. They control it. The Vakreen can shut down any route at will. They can trap entire fleets between stars. That is how they maintain control. Any species that rebels can be isolated, cut off, left to die. Elena understood immediately. The Imperium's power was not just military. It was strategic control of the only practical means of interstellar travel. Every species that used the beacon network was dependent on Vakreen permission to move between stars. Humanity never used the beacons, she said quietly. Our FTL drive is independent. Crude, but ours. Which makes us the only species that cannot be controlled this way. Webb finished. An explosion shook the command center. The sound of gunfire was very close now. Rodriguez's voice came over the channel, strained and desperate. Captain, we cannot hold much longer. You need to finish whatever you are doing. Elena made her decision. Webb, download everything. Every control code. Every access protocol. The entire network. That will take time. Then work fast. Elena moved to the entrance. The corridor outside was filled with smoke. Bodies lay scattered, both human and Vakreen. In the distance, she could see Vakreen Marines advancing. Rodriguez and the remaining defenders were falling back, trading space for time. She picked up a rifle from a fallen Marine and took position at the entrance. Commander Webb worked behind her, downloading centuries of the Imperium's most carefully guarded secrets. And in the corridors of the beacon, humans died buying seconds with their lives. The Vakreen Marines reached the command center entrance 3 minutes later. Elena and her security detail held the doorway, firing in controlled bursts. The corridor was narrow, which limited how many enemies could advance at once. But ammunition was running low and the Vakreen kept coming. Webb shouted from behind her. Download is at 70%. I need more time. Elena changed her rifle's magazine. It was her last one. You will get it. A Vakreen grenade bounced into the doorway. One of Elena's security guards threw himself on it, his armored body absorbing the blast. He died saving the others, but the explosion created enough smoke and confusion for the Vakreen to push forward. 3 of them made it through the doorway before Elena could stop them. Close quarters fighting erupted inside the command center. Elena shot one Vakreen soldier at point-blank range. Commander Webb drew his sidearm and killed another. The 3rd Vakreen warrior engaged the remaining security team in brutal hand-to-hand combat before being overwhelmed. Download is at 90%, Webb gasped. More Vakreen Marines were at the entrance. Elena was down to her sidearm. She had perhaps 30 rounds left. Against professional soldiers in full armor, that would not last long. She accepted that she was going to die here. She just needed to die slowly enough. Then something unexpected happened. The Vakreen stopped advancing. Their commander was shouting orders to pull back. Elena risked a glance down the corridor and saw them retreating to defensive positions. They were not running away. They were making room for something. Fleet Admiral Corvin appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by a full security detail. He was not wearing combat armor, just his command uniform. He walked forward calmly until he was 15 meters from the command center entrance. Close enough to be heard clearly, far enough to retreat if necessary. Captain Vasquez, he called out. I propose a negotiation. Elena kept her weapon ready. You are not in a position to negotiate. Your station is compromised. My people have accessed your systems. And you are not in a position to escape, Corvin replied. My ships surround the station. Even if you transmitted the data you have stolen, you will not live to see what happens next. But perhaps we can find an arrangement that allows both of us to survive. Download complete, Webb whispered behind her. Elena felt a surge of triumph. They had it. Everything. The control codes for the entire beacon network. She just needed to transmit it. But Corvin was right about one thing. The Vakreen could jam any transmission from inside the station. They would need to get the data to a ship or at least to an external transmitter. She studied Corvin's face. He was intelligent, experienced, and clearly understood the strategic value of what had been stolen. He also looked tired. 3 months of chasing the Indomitable had taken a toll. This was an officer who had won hundreds of battles, and now one human ship had created a crisis that threatened the entire Imperium. "What are you offering?" she asked. Corvin stepped closer, his hands visible and empty. "Withdraw from the station. Return to your ship. You will be allowed to leave. In exchange, you do not transmit the data you have stolen. Earth will be spared invasion. Humanity will be granted full sovereignty over your home system. We will even share some technology to help you develop." It was a generous offer. More than Elena had expected. But she understood why Corvin was making it. If the control codes for the beacon network became public, every subject species in the galaxy would know the truth. The Imperium's control was not based on military superiority alone. It was based on controlling the means of travel. Take that away and the whole structure would collapse. "You will let us go, and in exchange we keep quiet about how you really control the galaxy," Elena said. "Earth gets to survive, but everyone else stays enslaved." "Those other species are not your concern," Corvin replied. "You have fought well, Captain. You have earned the survival of your people. Take the victory. Trying to save the entire galaxy will only get you killed." Elena thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had been waiting for 3 months to learn their fate, about her crew, the 400 survivors who had followed her on this impossible mission. She could save them. All she had to do was accept Corvin's deal. She thought about Sergeant Rodriguez and the 200 Marines who had died buying time for this moment, about the Lixian rebels who had risked everything to help humanity, about every species that lived under Vakreen domination, controlled through secrets and fear. She made her choice. Web, transmit everything on all frequencies, every channel, every bandwidth. Send it to everyone who can receive. Webb's fingers moved across the console. "Transmitting now." Corvin's expression hardened. "That was foolish, Captain. You have just ensured your own death and possibly doomed your species." "Maybe," Elena said, "but we just freed everyone else." The data burst out from the beacon station. It was too massive for the Vakreen to jam completely. Fragments reached dozens of ships, hundreds of stations, thousands of receivers. Within minutes, it was spreading through the underground networks of every subject species. Within hours, it would reach every corner of the galaxy. The secrets of the beacon network were no longer secret. Every species could now see exactly how the Vakreen maintained control. More importantly, they had the access codes. They could see which routes were open and which were closed. They could, in theory, access the network themselves. Across the galaxy, the response was immediate. On 40 worlds, uprisings erupted. Subject species that had waited for centuries for an opportunity suddenly saw one. Vakreen garrisons found themselves besieged. Government buildings were stormed. Collaboration officials were arrested or executed by their own people. The Imperium's communication networks were overwhelmed with emergency signals. Governors called for reinforcements. Fleet commanders requested orders. Everyone was asking the same question: how did the control codes leak? In the command center of the Eternal Dominion, Corvin received report after report of chaos spreading through the sector. His carefully maintained order was unraveling in real time. He looked at Captain Vasquez through the tactical feed and felt something between respect and rage. "You have destroyed 3,000 years of stability," he said quietly. "No," Elena replied. "We destroyed 3,000 years of slavery. What comes next is up to everyone you have been controlling." Corvin could have ordered his Marines to storm the command center and kill every human inside. He could have destroyed the beacon station entirely out of spite. But he was a military officer, not a fanatic. The situation had changed. The Imperium's strategic advantage was gone. Killing one human captain would not restore it. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships recall invasion forces from Earth immediately. We are needed to suppress uprisings in our core territories. The human homeworld is no longer a priority target." Then he looked back at the command center. "Captain Vasquez, my ships are withdrawing from this sector. The beacon is no longer valuable to us without secrecy. You are free to leave if your ship is still capable of flight. But understand this. The galaxy you have just freed will not thank you. Without the Imperium enforcing order, these species will turn on each other. War will spread. Billions will die. You have not created freedom. You have created chaos. Maybe, Elena said. But at least it will be their chaos. Their choice. Not yours, Corvin nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked away, his marines following. The sound of Vacrine boots faded down the corridor. After 3 months of constant combat, the silence felt strange. Webb moved to Elena's side. Captain, the Indomitable is heavily damaged. Our fusion core is failing. We have maybe enough power for one short FTL jump. Enough to get back to Sol system, but that is all. Elena looked around the command center at the survivors of her security detail. 8 people out of the 60 who had started the assault. She thought about the 400 crew members still alive on the Indomitable out of the original 847. She thought about Rodriguez and all the others who had died in these corridors. Then we go home, she said. We have done what we came to do. The Indomitable limped out of the beacon station 3 hours later. Its hull was scarred and broken. Its engines barely functioned. But it was flying. The crew, exhausted and grieving, turned their ship toward Earth. They arrived in Sol system 4 days later. Earth's defense fleet, battered but surviving, escorted them to a hero's welcome. The Vacrine invasion force had withdrawn. Humanity was free. Across the galaxy, the wars that Corvin predicted had already begun. Species fought for independence. Old grudges resurfaced. Vacrine territories fractured into dozens of smaller conflicts. The stability of the Imperium gave way to chaos and bloodshed. But humanity had kept its promise. They had transmitted the data not just to rebel groups, but to everyone. They shared everything they had learned about beacon technology. They offered their independent FTL drive designs to any species that wanted them. They positioned themselves not as conquerors, but as mediators. It would take decades for the galaxy to settle into a new order. Many would die in the transition. But for the first time in 3,000 years, every species had the chance to choose its own path. The Indomitable was placed in orbit around Earth as a memorial.